Tonight we have a special guest and colleague, Laura Coates, a senior legal analyst for CNN and one that actually tried cases inside of a courtroom as a federal prosecutor with the Department of Justice. She's just written a brilliant and revealing memoir about her time navigating the criminal legal system titled Just Pursuit: A Black Prosecutor's Fight for Fairness. And she joins me now. Laura Coates, welcome to the show.
Hello, I'm so happy to see you. Thank you for having me.
So proud of you. All right, let's dive in. Listen, what I love about your book is how you pull the curtains back on a system that communities of color already don't trust, and for good reason, but you do it from the lens of a prosecutor, which doesn't happen often. Listen, our show, we partner with the Innocence Project for a weekly series on wrongful convictions, and every single case involves prosecutorial misconduct, when finality is more important than fairness, and when the prosecution will do anything to get a conviction. But in your book, you uncover those ugly truths as an insider. What was this a difficult process for you to do?
You know, I think it was an unexpected book. I think as a lawyer, people often think we'll write about a Supreme Court decision and then we'll talk about its place in history and give the context. I wasn't interested in writing a book like that because I think it's more important for us to tell the truth. When we speak truth to power, you ought to know what the truth is. And that includes the good, the bad, the ugly, and not trying to self-aggrandize myself, but about actually peeling back that very curtain and showing people about the fallacy that Black and brown people somehow in our minds are confined to one role in the justice system, that of defendant in a disproportionate way, or that of defense counsel. Now, defense counsel has, as you well know, an extraordinarily important task, an extraordinarily important job. There's also the idea of what it's like to be the gatekeeper, to be the person to wield the discretion, to be the person to have that power. And what are you going to do with it, particularly when your own sense of self and your internal battles of allegiance are telling you a different direction than what the directives of the office may be?
Well, the pursuit of justice creates injustice. Talk to me about the struggles you experienced as a prosecutor, but also feeling sympathy for defendants of victimless crimes.
You know, I begin the book with that very statement, that the pursuit of justice creates injustice. And that might seem very counterintuitive to people. But the reality of things, we think about oftentimes in a binary way, that justice is just a guilty verdict or an acquittal. We often forget about the weight of the United States versus an individual. We think about just the defendant and the prosecution as opposed to everybody who might be involved in some other respect, whether it be a victim, a survivor, a witness, or anything. And I really took the time. I wanted to make sure that through a narrative memoir that was episodic, where each chapter stood alone, people understood that we're personifying these issues in the stories that I tell. The idea of wanting people to better understand. They know what the justice system might look like, which is overwhelmingly the legal system more than it's the justice system, but to really understand what is at stake, what really happens, you have to vicariously, if not personally, experience it. And I try to take people on the journey through talking about what it's like for me, a Black woman, to have to aid in the deportation of somebody. The idea of what this idea of believe women in the court of public opinion in a Me Too movement actually looks like in a courtroom. Who is the one that is the conduit of bias? And sometimes it's a woman. The idea of what it was like in the voting section, the Civil Rights Division, traveling in the South to monitor elections in the so-called post-racial era, talking about the realities of mistaken identity in that blink moment. And I, like you, have never had the luxury, and I doubt you would want it, nor have I, to leave and shed who you are at the door before you enter any room. I bring with me my lived experience as a Black woman and wife and mother and human being, but sometimes that can run afoul to the very directives an office gives you to pursue justice.
Well, we're definitely going to get to that a little later in the discussion, but your pursuit of justice in different situations while uncovering the injustice was remarkable to me. But the chapter that resonated with me the most was chapter 6, a seat at the right table, the tension between Black defense attorneys and prosecutors. Listen, the first line,
I wonder why.
Can I ask you something? That first question, that first line in that chapter, can I ask you something? I already knew what that question was, because I always got it, and I still get it from being a prosecutor, but I didn't get it from defense attorneys as much because they, most of them started at the DA's office, then transitioned over to the other side. Plus, they needed that they needed to stay in my good graces for good recommendations. But I got that question from Black people in general. They saw me the same way they saw police officers, but the question came to you by a Black female defense lawyer. I'm curious, why was your exchange with her memorable enough to include in your book?
Because we so often talk about, frankly, the idea of having a seat at the table and the importance of it and being in the room where it happens. And we often think about that being in positions of a policymaker or in a boardroom. But in reality, having a seat at the table is not enough if you are just going to be complicit. Having a seat at the table is not enough if your only role is going to be reactive, if it's going to respond once an injustice has occurred or a decision is already made. And largely, and I respect defense counsel a great deal for the work that they do and the service that they perform day in and day out under extraordinary circumstances. But I wanted to be in a position of gatekeeper, of proactive, of being able to exercise the discretion with the lived experience of knowing that our justice system is not infallible, nor are our officers, nor are our colleagues from whom we inherit cases, nor are we as human beings. And I wanted to ensure that that conversation, the kind that I had with that particular woman, was one I think we have in different contexts. I watched the then candidate, Senator Kamala Harris, have to field questions about her allegiance and where she was devoting her attention and questioning her role as the Attorney General of the state of California. And I found myself in kindred spirit with watching her try to have to even defend, knowing full well that, yes, we're talking about the disparate impact as well on Black and Brown people as defendants, but they're also Black and Brown victims who deserve the right to have a champion, who deserve the right of an advocate, who will understand and hold somebody accountable. And yet we still have this notion that we can only fill one role. And I wanted to make sure people understood the challenges that are inherent in which seat you choose. And both of us, both strong women, believed we had the right seat at the table, and how we were wielding our power was distinct. But whether we were coveting, whether we were complicit, whether we were trying to ensure the same goal, frankly, was probably the most unanticipated thing for people to realize, that there is not a side, there is a system. And who you are within it is going to determine whether justice is actually pursued. And I think about this every time I stood up and said, Laura Coates, on behalf of the people of the United States, that necessarily included the defendant, as much as it included the people offended by the conduct that was alleged. And I think we cannot forget that or lose sight of the fact that at times prosecutors, although we are focused in the role we are performing within our communities, we have to protect the constitutional rights of defendants. Otherwise, it means nothing to pursue it. If we don't realize, and you know this full well, that we are the beneficiaries at times as prosecutors of the same benefit of the doubt that is extended to police officers. And we complain and talk about that benefit of the doubt being extended unjustifiably at times, and how it is used as a way to explain away or attempt to justify behavior. Well, I suffer no fools in my criticism, and I don't excuse myself from the criticism of what role I may play in balancing how I use that benefit of the doubt. And I think we have to be in a place where we speak the truth about what happens with an eye towards changing a system, but also realizing every player's role in it and what we truly mean when we pursue justice. And God, can you imagine if one day we're not just pursuing justice, we actually catch it? Now that might be an America worth talking about.
Well, listen, Laura, before I go to break, and we've got a lot more to talk about with this new book, did you get your $20?
No. You have to read the book to know why that is funny. And I want you to know, once you read that chapter, everyone, know that I was minding my own business, having my little meal when I was interrupted. So I just want you all to know, I didn't seek out a fight, but I don't back down from it either.
Listen, you were a class act even back then. Listen. Okay, I've got more with Laura Coates and this new book. When we come back, more Making the Case. Welcome back to Making the Case. Still with me is Laura Coates, senior legal analyst for CNN and former prosecutor, who's just written an amazing book called Just Pursuit, A Black Prosecutor's Fight for Fairness. All right, Laura, so let's get to these chapters and listen, as I was reading, I was thinking this could seriously be a scripted series. Because listen, we've seen a couple of legal shows, or at least I have, where the female lead plays a criminal defense lawyer, and we're watching her buck the system in her relentless pursuit of justice. And I have yet to see a show where the protagonist is a prosecutor, aside from the last year or so, where prosecutors pursuing cops and wannabe cops for killing us have been applauded. Why do you think the pursuit of justice seems to only count from the defense table?
I think because people have a view towards the role of our law enforcement community and our justice system, it's baked into the recipe, honestly, of the experience of so many Black and brown people that there is an adversarial relationship. It's the same reason I think that many officers who are of color are having to challenge the notion of what will trump their own color or the color blue. And I think people continue to have this view, and frankly, it's justified in many respects over the course of history since the 13th Amendment. Frankly, you could watch Ava DuVernay's beautiful piece and film about this very notion about the evolution of what we think of in terms of law enforcement, the ideas of vigilantism and pig laws and ways in which to use the law to exploit the experiences and harm the experiences of Black and brown people. And I think because that is in our sort of DNA of our history and our thoughts, it's hard to shed the notion that you would want to root for somebody who might be within that very system. And I think it really is incumbent upon us to continue to challenge the notions of where we belong and where advocacy ought to exist. It must be on the bench. It must be on both sides of a congressional aisle. It's got to be in policymakers. It's got to be with the ideas of police officers and union presidents and boardrooms across this globe. And it also has to be within the justice system, people with an eye towards understanding why reforms are necessary and how two things can be true, Yodit. The idea of, look, you can have people who believe in civil rights, want to honor them, and are in positions of power to actually hold people accountable. And the two are not disconnected. It can be this symbiotic relationship. And although I won't pretend, I write about in the book, Just Pursuit, that it's very difficult at times to reconcile the role you hold within a system that you know is flawed, that is asking you to shed your identity at the door in furtherance of this cookie cutter notion of what justice is. And we've got to fight against that. As much as you fight for reform of the system, it cannot be confined to simply involving police encounters. Those are important. But shouldn't we be more expansive about the way we approach the justice system and any efforts to reform? About the Supreme Court's decision to give the benefit of the doubt in the form of allowing officers to be judged by a reasonable officer standard as opposed to a reasonable person standard, about their qualified immunity, which is a legal construct they created, to the ideas of the power of unions and national databases, including our bail system. And I know that you have spent many a holiday season, I've seen it on Twitter, where you have spent, while most people are going home, you are trying to make sure that people with the presumption of innocence are able to get bail. Now, that just seems like a convoluted system, that here we have the presumption of innocence, but you got to pay for it. You got to pay for it. And we know that if you're not able to be outside with your attorney, you already have the deck stacked against you, even with the presumption. And you're in Texas. I'm thinking about Sandra Bland and still wondering what happened to our sister, wondering what that was like and what actually transpired as we think about this bail process. And who can forget the young Khalif Browder? I mean, I'm a mother of a little boy and a little girl, and I cannot imagine somebody accusing my child of something as frankly benign as potentially taking a backpack and ending up in a place with notorious security concerns and in isolation for months, if not years on end. I mean, these are all part of conversations that we can have about what justice in America is and what reforms need to be made. But the storytelling of this book is a form of my own activism, of telling people the information, of seeing something and saying
Hmm.
something.
Laura, I could talk to you all night about this book. I seriously can, but I want to end with this one question for you. When it comes to advice for Black women in law, you had this one thing to say, quote, unapologetically bring your entire self into the courtroom. Our system of justice will be better for it. Now, people understand this generally, but talk to me about what that really means inside of a courtroom.
Don't leave who you are or your lived experience behind because you think that you must conform to some stereotypical notion of who can dole out justice. Your beliefs, your values, your lived experience, your moral compass should be as much of a guide as any legal code or textbook. And I think we have to, as women, stop being afraid and thinking that if you're a mother or if you emote and you experience and feel that somehow weakens your resolve, weakens your inability to be the type of advocate and champion people need. If anything, it heightens it. And I think when you bring in your healthy sense of skepticism, along with your understanding that the people of the United States includes every single one of us, justice will be served when you unapologetically say who you are on behalf of communities, the people, and your own sense of integrity. And don't forget it.